A lot of comic books, for all their strengths, do tend to get a bit formulaic. The superhero comes up against the supervillain, who has an evil plot that the hero could never possibly stop. But through their smarts and rugged tenacity, the hero triumphs at the last minute and the villain is stopped and sent back to prison. But sometimes a villain will go off script and actually pull off a victory over the hero. Welcome to Top 10 Nerd. I'm Andrew Boyd, and today we will be taking a look at the top 10 villains who actually won. Let's get started. Number 10, Thanos. So this one doesn't need a whole lot of explanation. Thanos in the comics is in love with Death. Like, literally, Death takes the form of a hot chick that he has the hots for. She has toyed with Thanos a lot over the years, but doesn't really respond much to his advances. He has killed countless people over the years in his quest to impress her, but his most lethal romantic gesture was, of course, when he planned to gather all of the Infinity Gems and use them to wipe out half of all life in the universe. And as crazy as that sounds, he did successfully used the gems to snap half of the universe out of existence. So, good for him, I guess. However, unlike in the movie the comics inspired, Thanos' victory wasn't nearly as decisive or long-lasting. First of all, despite his success, his goal was to gain Death's love, which he didn't achieve even after his grand gesture. Secondly, unlike in the films where 5 years passed and it was only through time travel that the Avengers were able to fix things, in the comics things were set right much faster and with much less effort and sacrifice when Nebula stole the gauntlet and snapped everyone back. And then everyone beat the crap out of Thanos. So yes, he pulled off an impressive feat, but there are others on this list whose victories actually helped them achieve their long-term goals and weren't almost immediately undone. Hey, guess what? It's time for an Alpha Flight entry. Number 9, Jerome Jaxon. When James Hudson discovered that his boss, Jerome Jaxon, was going to sell his geo-exploration suit to the American military as a weapon, he took the suit's helmet, destroyed the plans, and left his job at Amcam Oil to work for the Canadian government, going on to form Alpha Flight and become the superhero Guardian. Jaxon caught the brunt of the consequences for this and was fired from his job. His wife then left him, taking the kids with her, and he became desperate and broke. He tried to end his own life, but his landlady, who was coming to evict him, found him hanging and cut him free. The self-harm attempt didn't work, and he was confined to a wheelchair and he became homeless. He discovered that Hudson was now a superhero and vowed revenge and sold Hudson's identity to the evil Roxxon Corporation, who gave him the resources to form the villain team Omega Flight, whose only purpose was to kill Hudson. They set a trap for James, tricking him into moving to New York for a job and then attacking him. Jaxon attacked Guardian using the box robot, but Guardian managed to use his suit's power supply to overload the robot, killing Jaxon. However, this caused Guardian's suit to overload and blow up, killing him as well. So it cost him his life, but Jaxon got what he wanted. It would later turn out that Guardian was alive and had actually been sent through time, and he eventually came back, but his life has never really gotten back on track since then, and even all these years later he is dealing with the fallout of Jackson's one attempt at his life. Good thing Jaxon is dead. Or is he? There's been rumblings that he may still be alive, being kept somewhere in the Roxxon basement. Number 8, the Red Skull. This one's outside of main continuity and isn't one that requires a lot of explanation, so I'm going to rank it relatively near the bottom. On Earth 807,128, where the Old Man Logan story takes place, Captain America's old foe managed to organize all of the Earth's supervillains and used them to defeat all of the heroes of their world and take over the United States. As he explained to a dying Captain America, Abomination was given California, although a crazed Hulk gang would eventually take this over. Dr. Doom was given the Bible Belt, and Magneto was given Las Vegas, although this was eventually taken over by the Kingpin. Red Skull took over the White House and installed himself as dictator. He ruled for 50 years, collecting trophies of the fallen heroes and routinely wearing Captain America's bloodstained suit. His rule was eventually brought to an end when Wolverine took off his head with Captain America's shield. Number 7, Bullseye. Very little is known about the psychopathic assassin simply known as Lester, better known as Bullseye. He has told contradictory stories about his name and his childhood, with the only consistency being that he killed his father before using his incredible throwing skills to become a Major League Baseball player. However, he became bored of playing no-hitter games and instead became an operative of the United States NSA before eventually becoming a freelance assassin. In Bullseye's hands, anything is a weapon, as he is able to throw both weapons in simple everyday objects with lethal and pinpoint accuracy. He's one of Daredevil's arch enemies, and despite his best efforts, Daredevil usually manages to put a stop to his antics. This has resulted in Bullseye becoming obsessed with making Daredevil miserable, something he achieved in Daredevil number 181 when he escaped from prison and decided to get his job back as Kingpin's chief assassin and take out Daredevil. To do this, he had to take out the current assassin, who was Matt's flame Elektra. He killed her and went after Daredevil. Daredevil wins this fight, but loses Elektra. When Bullseye eventually learns Daredevil's identity and what Elektra meant to him, he considers this a retroactive win that he's thrown in Matt's face ever since. As if that weren't enough, a few years later, he managed to kill Matt's other love interest, Karen Page, making him responsible for two of the worst moments in Daredevil's typically terrible life. Number 6. The Joker. The Joker has made a long career of making Batman miserable by racking up massive body counts while enacting twisted schemes to bring Gotham City to its knees. Batman is usually able to stop the Joker before he achieves his ultimate goal, but sometimes the Clown Prince of Crime gets the better of the Dark Knight. The most infamous example of this was when Joker captured the second Robin, Jason Todd. He beat him with a crowbar and left him in a warehouse that was rigged to explode. Batman almost got there in time to save Jason, but Robin was blown to smithereens. Batman tried to arrest the Joker, but in a bizarre twist, because Joker was acting as the ambassador to Iran at that time, he was not charged with the crime due to diplomatic immunity. Batman did stop the Joker from completing his plan to gas the UN, but considering that Batman considers losing Jason his greatest failure, that kinda makes it the Joker's greatest win. And considering how much trauma the incident caused Jason once he returned to life, and the fact that it drove him to become a murderous vigilante whose relationship with Batman is tense at best as a result, it has been a long-lasting and fruitful victory for the Ace of Knaves known as the Joker. Number 5. Lex Luthor. One of the most long-running pair of enemies in comics is of course Superman and Lex Luthor. Depending on the continuity, the details might change a bit on the why or the how the first two came into conflict, but what has remained pretty consistent is that Lex is an evil super genius who despises the Man of Steel and comes up with various schemes to destroy him. These schemes usually don't end up working out for him, and he ends up defeated by the hero, but an example of Lex finally getting what he wants is in the continuity featured in Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman. In this story, Lex Luthor was captured and in prison until the US military invited him to use his brilliant mind for good under their direct supervision. He agreed, but one day he was looking at himself in the mirror and noticed some wrinkles forming on his face, causing him to realize that he was getting older and Superman wasn't. So he decided that in order to die happy, it was time to get serious about killing Superman. He installed a genetically altered bomb in human form on the manned Sun mission being run by Mr. Quintum, and controlled the genetic explosive from his quarters with his voice, getting the timing exact in order to compensate for the 9-minute signal delay. Just as Luthor predicted, Superman came to Dr. Quintum's aid and saved the day, but what Supes didn't know was that by getting so close to the sun, his cells had absorbed too much solar radiation and were not able to efficiently process the excess energy, essentially giving Superman a fatal disease. This is all just in the first issue of the series, and the rest of the issues are about Superman coming to terms with his mortality and putting his affairs in order in one of the best Superman stories ever told. He comes into conflict with Luthor near the end of the story and puts an end to his plans for world domination, but with everything going on in the story, it can sometimes be difficult to remember that at the start of the story, Luthor has already achieved his ultimate goal. Anything else is just gravy. Number 4. The Green Goblin. For a lot of his early run as the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn had no memories of his criminal activities due to the Goblin being a separate personality. Green Goblin tangled with Spider-Man several times over the years, with Goblin eventually swearing to bring misery and pain into Spider-Man's life, as revenge for always stopping his schemes. He eventually was able to follow Spidey and watch him change in an alley, discovering that he was really Peter Parker. Osborn eventually became aware of his Goblin side and embraced it, and concocted a scheme to ruin Spider-Man's life. It's not actually a particularly complicated scheme when you think about it. In Amazing Spider-Man 121, the Goblin kidnapped Peter's girlfriend Gwen Stacy and then threw her off a bridge. Spider-Man managed to snag her with a web, but the whiplash caused by her sudden stop caused her to break her neck. So, the Goblin achieved his goal of causing Peter as much pain as possible. However, I think the Goblin may have ended up in more pain in the next issue when he tried to hit Spider-Man with his glider, but Spider-Man dodged, resulting in Osborn getting impaled by his own glider and dying. Of course, this was later retconned, and the Green Goblin would cause Spider-Man much more trouble over the years, but he would never achieve such a personal blow against his enemies in the years since. Number 3. Bane. Bane was born in a prison in Santa Prisca, where he grew to be a violent and cruel monster who uses the chemical known as venom to grow his strength to inhuman levels. He had a vision when he was young that told him if he could conquer his fear, he could rule the world, and he saw a vision of a large, terrifying bat. Years later, he would hear from his cellmate about Gotham City and its protector, Batman. He escaped prison and went to Gotham with a plan to defeat and break the Bat. Bane observed Batman and discovered that he was really Bruce Wayne. He caused a prison break at Arkham Asylum, freeing all of Batman's most dangerous foes and setting them loose on the city. Batman was pushed to the limit, rounding them up, and by the time he had succeeded, was so tired and burnt out that he could hardly stand. When Bane was sure that Batman was sufficiently drained, he showed up at Wayne Manor and beat the stuffing out of Batman, raised him over his knee, and broke Batman's back over his knee like a breadstick. Bane was eventually defeated by Bruce's stand-in Batman, and Batman eventually recovered and continued his war on crime, but Bane will always be remembered as the man who broke the Bat. For more information on this arc, check out my video on Batman Nightfall in our Attempting to Explain video. Number 2. Dr. Octopus. One of Spider-Man's original enemies, appearing all the way back in Amazing Spider-Man number 3, Dr. Otto Octavius has come close to besting Spidey several times over the years, having formed the Sinister Six and giving the webbed wallcrawler lots of trouble with his 4 mechanical arms, and his ability to romance his aunt. But we're going to talk about the time he won without question against his archenemy. When Doc Ock discovered that all of his battles and injuries over the years were causing his body to decay and that he only had months to live, he managed to use a brain-swapping Octobot to switch bodies with Peter Parker, giving Ock control of the young hero's rockin' bod and leaving Peter trapped in Ock's flabby old dying body. Peter tried to get help from Tony Stark, but Ock battled him one last time, causing Peter in Octavius' body to fall to his death. As their minds were connected, Peter was able to make Ock experience all his worst moments to teach him that with great power comes blah 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 blah. And Ock decided to become a superhero, operating as the superior Spider-Man. He eventually restored Peter to life in his body, but that doesn't change the fact that Doc Ock set out to kill Spider-Man and take his body, and he did it flawlessly. Number 1. Ozymandius. In the Watchmen universe created by Alan Moore, superheroes were outlawed and the United States and Russia are at the brink of nuclear war. The smartest man alive, Adrian Veidt, formerly the hero Ozymandius, came up with a plan to save the world at the cost of millions of lives. He cloned the brain of a murdered psychic and created a giant psychic squid, which he planned to teleport into New York, where it would kill millions of people with a psychic attack, making the world think that they were under attack by aliens, causing them to unite against a common threat. It's actually more complicated than that, but it's kinda hard to explain, and frankly you should just read Watchmen if you hadn't already. His plan was uncovered by the heroes of the book, who went to Veidt's Arctic palace to confront him and try and stop him, but after explaining his evil plan, he clarified that he actually had already enacted his plan 45 minutes prior, and that they were too late to stop him. In order to preserve the peace that had been brought as a result, the heroes decided to go along with the charade Ozymandias had concocted, except Rorschach, who was promptly killed. However, his journal found its way into the hands of a weird far-right newspaper, leaving the possibility that the truth could come out. Alan Moore intended for this to be an ambiguous ending, but there have been some sequels that were made without his involvement or approval, such as in the comics Doomsday Clock, where it's revealed that the journal was published and actually believed, leading to Veidt's long-term plan failing. But in the HBO follow-up series, the journal was published but ignored by most people, other than some fringe conspiracy theorists, making Veidt's plan largely a smashing success, leading to many years of peace before the events of the show. Oh, I need to rewatch that show, I loved it. Any other dastardly villains who managed to win against their goody two-shoes enemies? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe for more Top 10 Nerd.